Going into our text layers and into the drop-down options and properties, there's a play button icon with the text animate beside it. Depending if we're working with 2D or 3D, or using the classic 3D versus the Cinema 4D, the basics will almost be the same for the Cinema 4D, but just adding a little bit extra options and a bit more depth to it, like animators using fill and stroke for the normal 2D text layers. Pressing this animate button, this drop-down menu of all the animators will appear. In the very top, there's an option called Enable Per Character 3D, and it's letting us animate text in 3D space. Just like the standard transform properties for a text layer, the same ones appear here, plus the skew, which bends or leans the text to the sides. But let's start with the Fill Color Animate RBG and come back for the Enable Per Character 3D and transform properties for the Cinema 4D soon. Now, there's a new option popping up called Animator 1, where we might choose any fill color of our liking. Then open Range Selector 1, it reveals a few options to animate this property. The start and end can be keyframed to get a gradual color animation on or off. It's now on start 0% and end 100%, meaning that the whole text will be affected by any type of animation. Though if you raise the start to the middle, and it will be roughly 46% here now, either down in the text or drag this little red triangle to the right. Only half of the text saying effects will be affected and colored now. Same goes for the opposite direction, if the end is lowered to 50% or any other number. Offset is then used to move or animate the marked area between the start and end, offsetting it either to the left, going to the minus or negative percent, or to the right with the positive percentage. There's really an endless amount of possibilities or varieties of text animations that you can do using these attributes and combine it together with the transform properties or the coloring. So really try to experiment a little bit with it yourself. Moving on to advanced, there's a few extra options and adjustments. We can, for example, choose between units in either percentage or index, what the animation is based on, and some variations depending on if we have the standard characters excluding spaces, words, or only using with lines. Then for the mode, just the add and subtract will be noticeable differences here, with the first adding the fill color and the subtract will remove it. But if we, for example, add another property like position, then one more range selector. It's now possible to bend these around for some different styles of animation. While using the other four modes, intersect, min, max, and difference, for even more control. The amount function a bit like opacity for the fill color, down to minus 100% for nothing, and up all the way to 100% for full coloring. With the shape, the effect might be slightly more evident when using the transform properties at the same time, but it might also give some interesting kind of look when only using the actual color. Moreover, possibly change from square to ramp up, and giving a bit more gradual, smooth decrease of the red fill and increase of the white fill, starting at minus 100% and offset up to 100%, plus position from down to up. The ramp down, pretty much just invert it. And the triangle compresses the green fill color quite a lot to the center, and moving the position in a pointy manner. while the round does slightly less color compression and rounded position animation, if you will. While smooth shape is probably about there in between those last two. Use smoothness to adjust the gradual increase or decrease of changes between the two colors, either smooth and more gradient or more abrupt and sharp, while functioning the same with the position, either smoother or sharper movement. Then we got the ease high and the ease low. They kind of work like a brake or an accelerator, a little bit depending on what type of amount you're giving them, and they're also a little bit dependent on each other. So if we have these three copies of text, the top one having 100%, middle one 0%, and the bottom one minus 100%. The top one will actually drop down or accelerate faster in the beginning compared to the other two, but slow down or break more gradually and smoother in the bottom. While the text moves up, the effect becomes the opposite. The top text takes longer time to accelerate in the beginning compared to the other two, but then doesn't break until reaching the very top. And the middle one, without any easing, function just like linear keyframes, moving with a consistent and even speed. Now with minus 100% for the lower one, 0% for the middle, and 100% ease low on the top, the effect will be completely opposite as before. There will be slower acceleration for the top layer in the beginning, gradually releasing the brake, then very fast direct movement or jump from about the middle to the bottom, and vice versa on the way up. And finally, you can see the changes here when using both 100% ease high and low, giving a slow start in the top, gradually releasing the brake for the top layer, and then fast acceleration in the middle, then slow gradual brake again in the end or bottom. Then the bottom layer with minus 100% for both will get a direct accelerator start, actually getting some easing and gradual brake in the middle, then quick acceleration and jump down to the bottom end directly. And what we just went through right now is actually the sixth of the original Disney's 12 principles of animation. Slow in and slow out, intended to give or represent a bit more realistic look and feel, possibly turn or randomize order to get different patterns. Anywhere from the value of down at 0 or getting all the way up to 10,000. Now there's a new icon called Add up here, which basically gives us the same option as the Animate icon, but instead for this specific Animator one, plus 3 new extra options, one more range, a Wiggly, and also expression selector. But I will come back to these ones within short. Instead, let's check out the fill color hue first, which is represented as a color wheel of 360 degrees. It's connected to the fill color, so depending on what color you start on, the degree for the fill hue will differ and only work properly if not fully white, black, or gray. And this might be a really nice and handy one if you want to do some type of text animations where you go through the whole color hue wheel. Possibly get a separate controller for the fill saturation, the brightness, and also the opacity. Exactly, the same things may be done to the stroke color. Just make sure that you actually have it turned on first inside the property panel. Plus, adding an extra property to control the width of the stroke. Going back to the Enable per character 3D, either work in Advanced 3D mode or Cinema 4D with this one for getting the best results, and I will choose the latter. The changes we got now is that the option for fill and stroke and the inter-character blending won't be available anymore along with blending mode and mattes. However, we're changing out this one to some other interesting ones where we, for example, can add some extra depth to it in the set position. And we might also do a little bit of text animations for each of the letters separately. So when going back to Animate and choose all transform properties, instead of just being able to animate the X and Y or horizontal and vertical that we've seen before, it's now also possible to animate the set value or depth for the anchor point, position and scale. And as we saw previously under the transform properties section, the prior rotation property when using 2D has been replaced with the 3 individual properties of X, Y, and Z. And all these values and properties are connected to the range selector of both, which means we may animate everything either in here with keyframes or some extra options in that selector. So let's do just that and create a basic text animation using the transform properties. Starting off, I will adjust the Y and the Z position properties slightly down and backwards. The opacity I will drag down to 0%. Now sneaking back into our range selector, drag down the offset to -100%, create a keyframe and going forward roughly 1.5 seconds and drag it up to 100%. Let's do a revealing text by changing the shape to ramp up in advanced, adding some ease, 25% low and 100% high. And we have something like this. Just to show some others, smash that randomize order. And to see the separation of characters as well, go to the last keyframe of the offset value and create a keyframe here for X, Y, and Z. Back to the beginning again and give everyone a little 360-degree spin, writing 1 here. And this is what we get now. Moving on, I will get rid of the animator. Then next, I will dive into some of the options and adjustments for the text geometry and the text material. Let's swap the renderer now from Cinema 4D to Advanced 3D, just to be able to see this a bit easier and instead of creating a light. Under the geometry options, we got the bevel style with either set to none as now or choose from angular, concave and convex to be able to get some slight variations to the edges of the text layers. The bevel depth can be adjusted between the values of 0 and 10. Hole bevel depth gives some maneuverability for all letters with a hole in it, as for the A and R in this text layer. Then the last one here, the extrusion depth, is using the depth from 0 up to maximum 1000. Though, if you want to go even deeper, use the set property for the scaling. However though, it will also change the look of the bevel in the front. For the material options, let's change back to Cinema 4D actually again to see a few more options than before. Then add a light spot. Make sure the cast shadows are selected. Adjust it slightly, both light and text, if needed. To get to shadows, let's create a new solid and turn it 3D. Change the viewer to line them up a bit easier to left for now, and we need a solid to be in the very back to the left, the text in the middle, and the light to the furthest right or front. Now, if heading back into the material options and toggle the cast shadows, only shadows or off. Next, there's a property called light transmission, and this one will actually only work in the classic 3D renderer, so it doesn't work in the Cinema 4D or the advanced 3D renderer, which might also be seen under the composition settings. So if we're looking at the classic 3D versus the advanced 3D versus the Cinema 4D, well, I guess you just can't have the whole smorgasbord, I guess, as a whole Swedish buffet at the same time in After Effects. So let's change it to classic 3D for this one. And just like that, cranking up the percentage on the light transmission, the light and text layer will function as a projector and showing a reflection of the text or image in the front of the background. And if you want, turn the cast shadows to only again and only get the projection glued to the background. And no matter where you move your text, shapes or objects or the background, as long as it keeps the same stacking order of depth with the light in the front, text or image in the middle, and a solid or any type of background in the very back. There's an alternative to choose if the layer shall accept shadows from current on, which is accept shadows both from anything in front and the letters here themselves, or only disable. Well, why it's actually there for the Cinema 4D might be a little bit questionable as it's not actually doing anything, but perhaps it's about time that it should. Who knows? For the appears in reflection, let's create one more solid for this one. And flip over the X rotation to 90 degrees to get it horizontal. And I will make some adjustment to line it up with the text and background. So turning off the accept shadows. And dragging down metal to 0 and indicate how much of a surface will change the color dependent on the mirror-like reflected light. The last two changes aren't a must, but more of visual preferences. And there's an option to switch on and off the accept light. Further, at the very bottom, there are 3 important settings for reflection, so let's ramp up the reflection intensity to 100%. Sharpness, we keep at 100%, but this one might be lowered as well to get some really interesting results with increased blur and rougher look. Then roll-off is a controller for the intensity or reflections depending on the angles between the surface and the light, which I will set to 100%. To see the difference and meaning of ambient, I will temporarily change the light source from spot to ambient, and now it's possible to lower the amount of ambience that's affecting the text layer. So undo the light again. Lastly here, for the diffuse, specular intensity and the specular shininess, adjusting the visual look in a bit more fine detail on the chosen amount. Now the per character 3D mode that we are currently working in, it offers quite a variety of different material options for specific parts of 3D objects or text. If we go into Animate again, in the middle there's 4 different options, with each one having similar types of properties for fine material adjustments for the front, bevel, side and back. And as we actually already gone through and explained all these 4 before, I will just quickly go through them and show the look of it. Let's go for the front, and starting off with the color RGB. And as normal, we get a new animator with the range selector, just as before. So color RGB, hue, 360 color wheel. Saturation, -100 versus 100%. Same with brightness. Opacity, 0 versus 100%. Ambient, without any light, 0 to 100%. We get the diffuse, specular intensity, and shininess. Metal, reflection, intensity, sharpness, and roll-off. Finally, here is another one of those Adobe specials, if you will, and it can get you really confused, this one, and it really did for me. Why? I just can't find out how to get to work and ungrade them, but yeah, they are connected to the previous ray traced 3D renderer. Perhaps there as a memory to honor that are not longer with us. Then we got another text animator, and it's the tracking. For this, we'll just create a new composition and call this one tracker. Then a new text layer and name tracker as well. This animator changes or animates the spacing between characters, as you see, and if we increase the tracking amount, something to be lowered to the negative, and turn the text backward or opposite direction if wanting to. Now the tracking type is set to before and after, which gives us that even separation between the letters, but if I go into the range selector, advanced, and change the shape to, for example, triangle or anything except for the actual square, it's now possible to manipulate the tracking type to either before, which will increase the spacing before the characters, and the tracking type after as opposite to before, and instead increasing the spacing after each character. Then a quick way to change the animation from the current center to either left or right is over here at the paragraph panel, where if we change to left aligned text, the text will just animate out to the right, and of course opposite direction, only to the left with right aligned text. Or there's actually another option, a little bit similar but with a little bit extra control. Going back into the add icon, property and line anchor, where at 50% it's similar to the center text. At 0% it will animate only to the right and 100% only to the left. And anything there in between those numbers will move or animate either a bit more to the left or a bit more to the right. Then for multi-line text layers, when adding another line of text in the same text layer, we can throw in an animator for the line spacing. This makes it possible to adjust and animate the line spacing as the X value horizontally or the Y value as vertical movement or changes. For the upcoming text animator, going back into animate and exploring the character offset and character value. So let's add them both. With this one, it's possible to change or animate any type of character as letters or numbers in the text layer to new characters based on any type of Unicode. And the Unicode is an international text encoding standard, and the values used in After Effects are connected to these numbers shown here in the list. By changing the character value first to any number here on the list, for example, value 48, giving zeros in this case, as for now the character range is set to preserve case and digits, meaning if we offset the characters, they will only change between 0 and 9, which will also be the same for letters or anything else. Then turning back the character value to 0, then character value to 1, it's offsetting the value of each character by 1 forward, while also be set to negative and instead change or animate backwards using both character value back again to 48, then offset with 1. It will be the sum of them, giving us the value of 49. And we can also change character range to full Unicode, and thus showing literally anything from the whole Unicode, or perhaps more correctly to that degree that After Effects is actually currently available within the system to show. Which is the same thing if I turn down the character value to 0 to get the original text, then offset the characters forward. So use it, for example, by adding a keyframe where you want the final text to appear. Go to the start and drag up the offset, and we have this simple character animation. Then possibly adjust the character alignment between the default left or top, center, right or bottom. Or with the adjust kerning, which are all affecting the spacing or positioning between the characters. Then last on this property list, the blur gives us the option to blur the text layer with increased intensity the higher amount we choose, either horizontally and vertically together, or unlink the values and blur them separately. As always with these animators, you can combine and play around with the range selector to get pretty much all type of interesting visual looks. And now let's check out the last two options for the text animation. For these I will use the front, the color, RGB, together with the position animator, as these are probably most obvious. Then under selector, concerning Wiggly and expression, and as already gone through, the range, and starting off with Wiggly. Now we will get this instant mix of quite random coloring for the characters, while also be able to set the position, changing the X, Y and Z values a bit for randomly spreading them out in the scene with the Wiggly. choosing from a few different modes, from intersect, add, subtract, min, max, and also difference. Change the max amount of Wiggly between -100 and 100%, and same with min amount. Based on characters, characters excluding spaces, words, and lines. And it's also possible to adjust wiggles per seconds, thus increasing the speed of which colors will change and how letters will reposition themselves over a second at a time. Correlation between 0 and 100%, where the 0% will be the maximum amount of randomness changing between colors and different positions. Whereas further up to the 100%, it moves and changes in a more similar pattern the closer we get to 100%, where 100% each letter changed color and moved to the same place at the same time. Temporal phase, in its very basics, is related to time and can be offset to either the negative or positive, and here to the left by full revolutions, meaning a complete cycle or a complete rotation of 360 degrees, or just a normal 0 to 360 degrees within one full lap, here to the right. While the next one, spatial phase, is changed in the same manner, but instead offsets the space or the positioning on the screen or composition. In a nutshell, just use and adjust them both to create variations of randomness in space and time for your text animations. The lock dimensions is especially useful with the scale property, so let's add that one as well. And now when it's off, we may see that the scaling happens without lock dimensions for the X, Y, and Z values, and kinda deforming the letters, creating a type of squash and stretch effect, which also is the first principle of Disney's 12 principles of animation: squash and stretch, but a little bit dependent on your needs and preference style for each individual project. It might be a nice handy tool to be able to lock the dimensions when you want to keep the proper dimensions for the typography. Last option here, the random seed, gives us the ability to create a controlled or matching perceived randomness. Whereas if this number is set to 0, there won't be any specific correlation between similar layers, so you won't be able to replicate it. It becomes more as true randomness, but sometimes we just want the perception of an actual randomness and want to be able to repeat the same type of perceived randomness for other type of layers. And in that case, tweaking the random seed to anywhere between 1 all the way up to 10,000, the perceived randomness can be matched, repeated, and move or change in a similar pattern, as long as this number and other settings are the same. The final option for the text animator under the selector is the expression property. Expressions in After Effects is a really valuable and handy topic, but it's also a very comprehensive and sometimes a bit complex topic. I will show you where you find it and the actual basic meaning of it and how to use it, but I won't go into the specific details about it. Then, as soon as we added the expression to the text animator, we get the option to choose what they shall be based on, either characters, characters excluding spaces, words, or lines. So let's first delete the range selector, and the expression selector will be an influencer of the elements or properties we added as an animator for the text. As with the position and color in this case, it's possible to change the amount of influence from -100 to 100% for the X, Y, and Z properties. If we right-click the amount, choose Edit Value, you're able to see it a bit more clearly, and especially here with the width, height, and depth, what type of units and what to preserve or link together. Now, the overall meaning of expressions in After Effects can be to create or link more complex animations together, or just add some different effects and adjustments to a specific type of property. And overall, it's based on the JavaScript language. Moreover, by pressing the arrow down at the amount property, we may view the section for expressions, first showing a text of which property it's affecting or influencing, an icon looking like an equal mark, which gives us the option to turn on and off the expressions. The good old pick whip that we drag to link or reference to a property, for example dragging it to the front color, and some new expressions will turn up here to the right for new reference. And over at this space is where to write actual expressions as lines of text or coding to influence the properties. The pre-written expression or attributes in the form of selector value, text index, and text total is specific expressions for the text animator and will only work down here as an extra with the basic property expressions. And currently this expression gives us a type of gradient look of the text. This expression is applied to each character, word, or lines of the text, and depending on what you choose to base it on individually. The first one here, the selector value, is related to the amount of influence over here, as we also see if replacing this by 100. Text index is now connected to the characters, from 1 representing A in the first word after, all the way up to 12, which is the S in the second word, effects. To show this, for example, keep just the selector value times text index and influence this by 3, so that every third character in the text won't be affected by the position and color animation. And then text total would be the total amount of characters, and 12 in this case. I will just quickly move on to another property within the text layer to show a type of basic expression, just to get a little bit hand of how we actually work in the expressions and how they could look like. So go to transform and add an expression to the position here. To add an expression, just hold Alt if you're on a PC still, or Option if you're on a Mac, and press the stopwatch. Alternative, you can also right-click the property and choose Edit Expression. And it's giving us the same look as for the expression selector, but now specifically for the position instead. We might add any type of expression, but let's throw in a simple wiggle. So just writing wiggle. Either write out the parentheses or hit the tab key as soon as you see the expression in the drop-down menu. And for the amount here, I would just go for 25, meaning that the text will wiggle at the frequency or speed of 20 with a maximum of 5 pixel movement, as in how far it wiggles around in space. And another way of effectively using the same expression is to right-click the position or any other property you animated and choose Copy Expression Only. And then you might mark one or several other layers and press Ctrl or Command again plus V to actually paste the expressions on that type of layer you just marked. If you're not actually familiar with the expressions beforehand, before seeing this, it might be quite a good idea to, if you're interested of the expressions further, at least go over to check the very basics in the After Effects user guide in the section about expressions. It can be very handy or helpful to at least get a little bit of basic knowledge around it. But once feeling a little bit more comfortable around it and how it functions. This little icon here beside the pick whip shows you all the expressions available in the language menu, where there's just a massive list of different type of variables related to every type of property to possibly adjust or animate. For this section, the very bottom one, text, is where to find all specific variables when doing text animation, but used in combination with those above. That was actually it for the text animator. Quite a large and a bit comprehensive part, but really nice one to be a bit more familiar with in After Effects.